I have always had an interest in vampires, and thus have consumed my fair share of media in the genre. Movies such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, The Lost Boys, Blade, Queen of the Damned, and Let the Right One In are personal favorites. The soundtrack in Queen of the Damned in particular is a favorite arrangement of mine from Jonathan Davis. My brothers and I had this soundtrack on repeat for years growing up. As a Nintendo fan since the 80s, I had always been aware of and interested in the Castlevania brand, but had never taken the time to fully dive into the series. A handful of years ago, I played through the Castlevania Lords of Shadow campaign on PC and remember enjoying the experience, but for multiple reasons, I fell off from the series and do not have much recollection of the story. On July 7th, 2017, my interest had been renewed with the release of the Castlevania TV series on Netflix. The gorgeous art style, top-notch voice acting, and witty dialogue between the vampire hunter Trevor Belmont, the magician Sypha Belnades, and the son of Dracula himself, Alucard Tepes, had my girlfriend and I hooked. Despite the show turning both of us into huge fans of the TV series, I still hadn't taken the time to play anything beyond the first entry in the Lords of Shadow campaign. In October 2021, this all changed with the release of Metroid Dread. Up until this point, I hadn't spent much time in the Metroid universe, but after purchasing and completing Metroid Dread on Nintendo Switch, I was ravenous and began the search for more content. To my dismay, I discovered that Nintendo did not offer any of the games in the series for purchase on the Nintendo Store. In fact, the only other Metroid game available on Switch as of this review is the original NES release and can only be accessed through the Nintendo Switch Online subscription service. I was frustrated and could not understand why Nintendo would release a new product for the franchise without a plan to capitalize on this excitement. This desire to play other Metroid games led to researching different titles in the Metroidvania genre. As you can imagine, Castlevania was consistently at the top of this list. After doing some research, I realized I was in for a large undertaking. The Castlevania series has a massive library, with consistent releases going back to the 80s. I decided to start at the very beginning with the release of the Anniversary Collection on Switch. Eventually, this led to the completion of the Advance Collection, and most recently, the completion of the Castlevania Requiem Collection on PlayStation 4. I also finished the Rondo of Blood 2.5D PSP remake titled The Dracula X Chronicles, but we will discuss that another time. Castlevania Rondo of Blood is a platform adventure game directed by Toru Higehara. I probably butchered that. Apologies. Released in Japan on October 29th, 1993, under the name another thing that I cannot say properly, so let me try it here. Akumajo Dracula X Chi no Rondo. Exclusively for the PC Engine's Super CD-ROM system. A reimagining of the game was released in the United States in 1995 under the name Castlevania Dracula X. This version of the game has been altered so drastically from its original release that it is widely considered to be an inferior version. It wasn't until March 15, 2010 that the original release came to the United States via the Wii Virtual Console, and again in 2018 via the Castlevania Requiem Collection on PS4. Taking place in 1792, Rondo of Blood focuses on the protagonist Richter Belmont, a direct descendant of Simon Belmont, who is the protagonist of the original Castlevania. Richter arrives at Dracula's castle in search of his beloved Annette, who is kidnapped by Dracula's servant, the Dark Priest Shaft. The story presentation for each Castlevania up to this point has not exactly been top-notch, but that is largely a byproduct of the technical limitations of the era. Having previously made the decision to acquire all trophies on PS4, I knew I'd get a decent grasp on what this game has to offer. I decided to play the game in Japanese with English subtitles during my first playthrough. Initial impressions of the game start strong. The game begins with hand-drawn cutscenes that encompass a level of visual quality not seen on the older entries in the series. The audio quality takes a leap forward, with the most impressive voice acting heard in the series up until this point, especially for the time period this game was released. Although I had selected Japanese dialogue, the first voice heard is speaking in German, as they were clearly trying to give that authentic Transylvania feel. The first stage kicks off with an audio masterpiece titled Blood Relations of Heaven and Earth, which is a metal inspired track that replaces the lead and rhythm guitar with a synthesizer that is accompanied by fist pumping drum tracks. The music sets the tone perfectly for the art style presented. After completing a total of 10 Castlevania games, this might be my favorite soundtrack in the series to date. If you have yet to play a Castlevania game for yourself, trust me, that is high praise. Vampire Killer, Cross of Fear, Bloody Tears, and OP number 13 are all tracks I have fallen in love with. Moving on to the gameplay, Richter uses a total of 4 inputs for jump, attack, subweapon, and item crash. One of the welcome changes that is not present in previous entries up until this point is that you can change your character's direction in midair, which gives a lot more flexibility in movement, as you can use your whip to attack enemies behind you while jumping forward. You can also perform a backflip by double tapping the jump button, which is an absolute game changer to the classic formula and loosens up the stiff feel of previous entries. It also looks super fucking cool. Sub-weapons make a return, including classics such as the axe, daggers, cross, and more. If you do not have a sub-weapon equipped, you're able to expend a ton of hearts and add a badass fire animation to your whip with devastating effects. For those unfamiliar, hearts in the Castlevania series usually serve as ammunition for your sub-weapons. Each of the sub-weapons have their own use in different situations and can drastically turn the tides in your favor. For example, the axe is thrown upwards with an arc and will come crashing downwards at the end of the throw. This is extremely useful for attacking at a distance against enemies in front, above, or below you. What really makes sub-weapons differ in this entry of the Castlevania series is the introduction of Item Crash. Item Crash are special moves assigned to each sub-weapon that can have devastating effects to enemies. These special moves cost a ton of hearts to use and make you wonder if it's worth the cost in each situation presented. And most of the time it isn't. This all changes when using Holy Water, which will grant you temporary invulnerability while you jump in the air and cover the screen in Holy Water raining from the sky, which deals massive amounts of damage. I found myself hoarding Holy Water and hearts to use this ability against the boss at the end of each and every stage. The level design in Rondo of Blood is rather straightforward, with a total of 9 main stages, but each stage is littered with secrets to uncover. The stages are relatively short, but jam-packed with difficult enemy encounters and tough platforming sections. Medusa heads make a glorious return, but not nearly as difficult to deal with this time around as they have been in previous entries. An important thing to know in Castlevania games is that breakable walls are common, and finding them is vital to your journey, as they can contain food to refill your health, hearts for ammunition, or even a full 1-up. Moral of the story? Hit every single wall that you come across, as you will need all the ammunition you can get when you reach the boss at the end of each stage. The bosses in Castlevania are never easy, and Rondo of Blood keeps with tradition. The bosses can initially seem impossible, but after practice, you will memorize the repeating animations and patterns, and finally, conquering a boss gives a fantastic feeling of accomplishment, akin to Dark Souls games. In my case, only a few of these bosses really gave me any trouble from a difficulty perspective. In stage 6, you end up fighting a giant bat, Medusa, Mummy, Frankenstein, and alas, Shaft himself for a total of 5 bosses, with one teeny tiny itsy bitsy scrap of health you get after beating the 3rd of these bosses, the Mummy. It took me quite a while to finish this one. With so many well-designed boss fights, it is tough to pick a favorite, but I will never forget my fights with the Werewolf Man, Minotaur, Death, and the man himself, Dracula. Let's talk about replay value. It's great. During your playthroughs, you can save NPCs vital to the story that are hidden throughout the castle. Saving these NPCs will unlock even more cutscenes that provide additional context to the story. One of the women you can save is named Maria, who is another playable character that controls much differently than Richter. Dawn is the fearsome whip known as the Vampire Killer. Maria's primary attack is a white dove, with a lot of range to attack at a distance. Not only do you get to control the fearsome dove, but you can also unlock a complete different set of sub-weapons throughout the game, such as the Mighty Tortoise, the Kitty Cat, the ever ominous Cardinal, or a fucking dragon. All of these sub-weapons have their own item crash special moves associated with them. Unlocking Maria involves obtaining a key in one of the early stages of the game and using said key to open a door on that stage. While the key is equipped, it completely replaces your sub-weapon, thus making the game even more difficult in the process, as you will only be able to rely on your whip for protection. Once you've located and opened said door, you will be presented with a cutscene between Richter and Maria, and rewarded with the abilities to select Maria as a playable character at the stage selection screen. Now that we have our fancy new playable character, let's take a new path on our journey to Dracula. That's right, many of the stages encountered on your first playthrough have alternate secret paths that lead to 4 completely new stages, and some of the most memorable bosses in the game. The serpent boss fight on the bridge via the alternate path for stage 1 is really cool. Accessing these areas usually involves hitting a wall that gives no indication that it is breakable, or falling down a pathway that you otherwise thought would kill you. Go ahead, give it a shot, try falling to your doom. I dare you. All in all, I greatly enjoyed my time with Castlevania Rondo of Blood, and I see myself completing this game regularly in the future. A full playthrough of the game only takes a few hours, and it doesn't hurt that they completely remade the game in 2.5D with the release of the Dracula X Chronicles on PSP, which adds even more replay value to this already stellar title. But we will save that for another video. Thank you for watching our review of Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Let us know what you think of the review in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Thanks for the support. Have a good day, guys.